think you know what's coming. You don't have a clue. You don't have a clue.
It's a phenomenon known as déjà vu. It's a phenomenon known as déjà vu. You arrive at a place you've never been, but it feels familiar. You look into the face of a stranger, and you feel like you've known her all your life.
Have we met?
Yeah. Yeah, we have.
Déjà vu is believed by many to be a trick of the mind, but the truth is far more extraordinary.
What if you had to tell someone the most important thing in the world, but you knew they'd never believe you?
I tried.
Doug, I've been put in charge of a newly formed investigative unit. I want you on the team.
Why me?
We've got some unique time constraints.
He has been shown a secret.
It's a brand new program. We can look anywhere 4 days in the past.
The government doesn't want you to know.
This is not surveillance. This is the actual past.
Yes. They found a way to fold space back onto itself. Remember the blackout we had a few years back?
Half the Northeast, you're saying you guys?
50 million homes?
My bad.
Wow.
This Thanksgiving, the key to stopping disaster
You think you know what's coming? You don't have a clue.
starts by unraveling the mystery of déjà vu.
What if you had to tell someone the most important thing in the world, but you knew they'd never believe you?
I try.
I got it.
You know you don't have to do this.
What if I already have?
Déjà vu. If you think it's just a feeling, go back and look again.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Kulturecast. I am your host, Chris Stachiw, and I'm joined by my good friend. He is the professor of media and communications over at Texas Tech University, TTU, the home of Patrick Mahomes. Yay. Your friend and mine, Dr. David Perlmutter.
Hello, Chris. Thank you again.
I would say you're Texas Tech's most famous export, but I think Patrick Mahomes may take the cake now for that. Would you say you're Switzerland's most famous export, Dr. David Perlmutter, or is that chocolate?
I think cheese, chocolate, and mountains are... The brand is more focused on them, yeah.
That's right. If you clicked on this episode, or if you're sitting in a lecture hall listening to it, or if your professor has told you to grace your ear holes with it, on this episode of the Kulturecast, we're going to be talking about a film from 2006 that stars someone who, just to bury the lead here, I'm not normally super big of a fan of his. So I am really excited to be more or less reminded that Denzel Washington is an actor that I don't resonate with particularly. However, that's not the case with this film. We're going to be talking about 2006's Tony Scott directed Déjà Vu. So the film is directed by Tony Scott, written by Bill Marsili and Terry Rossio. Stars Denzel Washington, Val Kilmer, Paula Patton, Bruce Greenwood, Adam Goldberg, and Jesus Christ himself, Jim Caviezel. The film is about an ATF agent who is effectively attempting to prevent the Oklahoma City bombing from happening in New Orleans, and he sort of prevents it, but doesn't prevent it because time travel's involved. It's a confusing movie. We will be spoiling it if you've never seen it before, so go ahead and watch it. Come on back, because if you've never seen it, this conversation may get a tad confusing if we talk about the plot of the film. Dr. Perlmutter, you and I talked on the phone before I was going to the True False Documentary Film Festival in Columbia, Missouri last week, and you were rattling off some films that you enjoyed watching or wanted to talk about, and this was on that list. So, sir, I am so very curious. Why Déjà Vu, a film that I know I saw in theaters, but no one in my family can remember if they saw it with me?
Well, I think that was part of the déjà vu part.
Right? Did I see this movie?
Did you see it? That would be a true time travel movie, right? It's nobody saw the movie. Nobody remembers it, even though they were there. Yeah, this movie has two prices of entry. One, it's a Denzel Washington movie, and Denzel Washington plays Denzel Washington, which is perfectly acceptable. There's been many stars in Hollywood history who were fantastic at playing themselves.
He's a star in the mold of a star that doesn't exist anymore. Yeah, and that's that. Either you resonate with him or you don't. Like, that's just the way it is with an actor like Denzel. Like you said, he's kind of always playing himself for the most part. Anyways.
I think there's a fan theory online that all Denzel Washington movies are in the same universe. Like we'll find out in his final film that he was some sort of some sort of Star Trek split personality, and it fractured into multiverse. Yeah. But so he is an excellent actor. He plays a certain role, the very smart, charming, personable guy who's also very tough. I mean, you've got a little bit of Michael Caine, a little bit of John Wick, a little bit of shards of other stars of the past. But as you said, some people just don't want to watch Denzel Washington. So there's Denzel Washington playing an ATF agent, but he's Denzel Washington playing an ATF agent. And then the other price of entry is that it's a Tony Scott film. So you're going to see, shockingly, and bless his memory, but you're going to see a Tony Scott film. Like, you're going to have 500 cuts per minute, and you're there's going to be interesting uses of light reflecting off of mirrors, and it's a Tony Scott film. So if you pay those two prices of entry, I think you get a pretty clever, thoughtful, fun, and occasionally deep time travel, time twisting movie. And it's worth, that's what it's worth. I mean, this should not have won an Oscar. It did not, unsurprisingly. But there's something to take away. And I've always been a fan of attempts. And use the word attempts to make time travel work as a plot, because it has so many inherent problems.
Right.
I'm going back to, and again, I guess this is a spoiler, the Superman, the original Christopher Reeve Superman movie, right? Where you've got a plot, and the plot resolved itself by Superman going back in time.
Dr. Perlmutter, he flew around the Earth backwards so fast that the Earth spun backwards, going back in time.
Yeah.
the mechanism through which he does it is so Superman specific that the only way it could ever work is in a cartoon setting. Because if that's how Denzel said he was going to time travel in this movie, Val Kilmer and everyone else would have laughed him out of the building.
Yeah, and there's a lot to talk about. I'm always interested in the portrayal of science in movies, and I think this also does a good job of not going the full Star Trek route of having long explanations of essentially magic, crazy stuff that doesn't exist in real world. But on the other hand, it doesn't under-explain it. I mean, the mechanism of time travel or time projection or time viewing feels good. Like, the technology looks good. So I could go through the basic plot, and then we could just cover some of the parts of it that, we mutually find interesting. But let's start out, if you don't mind. I was a professor at LSU during Hurricane Katrina. So the other part about this film, which has a resonance more than just an adventure movie or a fun lark or a thriller, was that this is in
post-Katrina New Orleans.
Yeah.
And I mean, they make mention of it, I think, one time, and then there's a poster or a couple banners that say, like, still strong after Katrina. They don't belabor the point, but it is very clearly post-Katrina.
Yes. And yeah, they don't. This is not a meditation on Katrina, but for those of us who lived nearby, and I lived in Baton Rouge, and we were impacted in the sense of, like, there was weather there, not as disastrous as New Orleans. And then we got several 100,000 people moving out of New Orleans, coming up it's an hour up the highway there. So a lot of the scenes, a lot of the setting were very familiar, and there was a certain sadness about it. In fact, that's one of the themes in this movie, is loss. What can you do to regain something you've lost, even when you maybe don't even know that you've lost it? And we'll get back to that in a moment. But as you said, this has got some elements of some other stuff, like it's like in the news stuff. Basically, Denzel Washington.
I mean, at the time in the news, I would say now's a lot in the news as well, but at the time, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, people using bombs.
Right.
To commit terrorism in the United States is unfortunately not out of the news.
No.
But So you begin with Denzel Washington. He arrives. We've seen a terrible crime occur, a ferry that is carrying Navy personnel and their families out into the river that New Orleans and the Atlantic Ocean, but the waters off New Orleans that everybody's familiar with from Katrina, and a bomb explodes, and I guess probably hundreds of people are killed, and
543 to be exact.
Yeah, and there are some pretty grisly moments there. I mean, you're seeing small children and innocent civilians burned to death and so on. I mean, it's not quite forensically lingering, but there's a lot of dead bodies in this movie. So right away, you get established horrible crime. Then Denzel Washington shows up. And of course, he's Denzel Washington. So there's 2,000 police officers and members of every other agency imaginable. But Denzel Washington walks through the crime scene and notices 3 or 4 things right away that immediately is a big breakthrough in the case. So that's okay. It's a Denzel Washington movie. He's going to be the one who solves most of the case. And you're thinking, like, this could be a regular crime thriller. I mean, he's done like 20 of these movies before, right? He's a tough cop who's smart and notices things other people don't notice, and he chases down the bad guy and captures him and probably saves a woman that he's in love with along the way. So like part of the plot is already in your head, but it takes an interesting twist, which is that he emerges, because he's Denzel Washington, as the lead breakthrough investigator, not necessarily in rank, but just in ability. And he is recruited to go to, it seems like it's temporarily set up. It's a mobile base.
It is. It has to be mobile. I think by convention of what they're getting at, it has to be moved.
This is not like they go to Area 51 or, some secret Antarctic lair or something like that. But it's a trailer. But the trailer with Adam Goldberg and some scientists there, and Bruce Greenwood always playing a great role. Bruce Greenwood is always like the head of something. Yeah. Like he's the president of Robot Incorporated or in iRobot.
Literally the president of the United States in 13 days.
Yeah, John F. Kennedy. He has that authority that just seems to lend itself to presidential, managerial, just in charge roles. And so he's sort of in charge here, but he introduces Denzel Washington, brings him in. Now you can tell Denzel Washington at the very beginning of this introduction to these scientists who, and this is 2006, right? So like flat screen TVs and big monitors are still relatively a new thing. Today, of course, we'd go into some secret science base and there'd be 300 giant 200-inch flat screens. But I remember looking at it and going like, yeah, this is really interesting. They've got all of these screens, all of this technology. The technology looks good for 2006. That like, oh, this is some sort of high tech. And it's explained to him that, oh, yeah, we are able to collate all the video cameras, all the surveillance cameras of the entire city of New Orleans. And there's some rules, like I think you can only go back 3 days.
4 days and 6 hours specifically.
Okay. Yeah, you watched it more recently than I did. And you can tell Denzel Washington is already getting a little bit suspicious, like, oh, wow, this is pretty neat technology. I had never heard of this before. Oh, yeah, it's a secret technology. But what kind of secret technology is it? And I'm going to sort of accelerate the plot here, but we find out that what they're really doing is they are looking back through time. They can see what happened in the past live as if it's happening right in front of them. That's reveal number 1, which is not the only one to come.
No, there are several in this movie. This movie ties itself into knots very quickly, I feel, which I appreciate. Yeah. I appreciate about it, but I do appreciate that early on. It's like we have this technology. It's called Snow White because it's a magic mirror, and we're able to do like Lucius Fox in Batman and The Dark Knight, and we have everything linked together, and we essentially have this view of the city because of all the cameras linked together. I like how there's the bait and switch of that, because that feels very pedestrian given where this film ultimately ends up going.
Yes. And when we've talked before, I've said that I have a rule that I wish all Hollywood filmmakers would follow, and nobody's consulted me. But the rule is actually one made up by people who have some authority. I heard Isaac Asimov say this, Arthur C. Clarke, George R. R. Martin said this too, which is that if you're going to have either a accelerated, amazing technology plot or a fantasy plot, you have to have hard walls and you have to have some rule.
Right.
You can't keep coming up with. So if you introduce dragons in chapter 1 of your fantasy epic, and the dragons can fly, that's fine. They can breathe fire. Okay, that's fine. They can talk. That's fine. They're telepathic. Great. Okay. But in book 3, we can't find out that they can magically time travel. And it's because they would have used it, right?
Right.
To get out of some other plot. So it's so adding on new capabilities. And I think this movie goes a little bit too far in that, because we're jumping ahead, but like at first, okay, you can only see back in the past, and there's no interaction with the past, right? We can't affect the past. Like
seemingly it's communicated that they
yes,
can.
That's right. But then we find, oh yeah, we can. Like, and of course, Denzel Washington, being Denzel Washington, playing Denzel Washington in a theater near you as Denzel Washington, flashes a little light on the screen, and the person from the past reacts to it, which is I thought was very clever.
Yes, I
so
agree.
Okay, so that's the next reveal is like, oh, there is some level of interactivity there. Okay, yeah. But then, of course, the final reveal is that if you squeeze yourself really tightly into a small homunculus pig,
into a dumbwaiter, a time traveling dumbwaiter, essentially.
Yeah, that's not a very good moment there. That's not where he has to squeeze himself real small. Somehow visually it just doesn't look real good. But he can travel to the past, so we find out
one way, only one way. It's a one-way trip. You are going into the past, and that is it. And effectively, the kind of the dodge here, the way they get around how hasn't anyone been doing this the whole time, is you, in going through the Einstein-Rosen bridge, an EMP essentially goes off that kills you on the other side. So the dodge is you would have to have a way to be resuscitated more or less immediately on the other side if you were to time travel. That's what they hint at. They don't say that explicitly. That ends up being the way that they get themselves out of the position they put themselves in, which goes to my point about this movie. I love that this movie doesn't treat the audience like moron. This movie actually respects the audience, because there are moments early on in the movie that the movie doesn't belabor points that are things that if you watch the movie again, you'll pick up on, like when he's walking on the docks at the beginning of the movie and he hears his phone ringing and he looks at his phone trying to figure out why his phone is ringing. It's because he's hearing the phone ringing on his dead body that he's standing 2 feet from and doesn't realize it because it's in a body bag. That's not something that you are even meant to give any thought to at the beginning of this movie, because you're not even meant to know at the beginning of this movie that there's time travel in it. And yet the movie is giving away itself early on, but not in a way that feels ham-fisted. For me, as kind of higgledy-piggledy as the time travel in this movie can be and is at times, I think for me this is one of my favorite uses of time travel in a movie, because it feels like they sew it all up pretty tightly, but they do leave a little gap for divine intervention, possibly? ? It's almost like this is Tony Scott going, maybe there is a God, because they essentially allude to the fact that it would take an act of divine intervention to move the stream over, to tide the stream over, to move it, to dam the stream and move it. And I mean, we see ostensibly at the end of the film, the outcome of the events is changed at the end of the film. So there must be something else. Denzel Washington alludes to it several times in the movie as, well, what if there's something else too? Like it could be science and something else. It's a very weird movie, because at times it feels like I'm musing on faith and science together, which I did not remember the last time I watched this movie, when I saw it when I was 16, 20 years ago in theaters.
Yeah, this movie, it has some of the elements of what are, in fact, a really good science fiction movie, which is that they don't try too hard to explain too much that is too crazy, right?
It's not the point of the movie. It would do nothing other than, it's like the Stranger Things of it all. If you start explaining too much, you have to explain everything. If you take it upon yourself to explain a couple things, you then take it upon yourself for most of these screenwriters to explain everything. And it's like some ambiguity left up to the viewer is actually beneficial. It has to.
So an example of that is that he starts falling in love with a woman that he's never met. Although, New Orleans is an interesting city in that it's a large metropolitan city, but like there's places that people tend to go more than others. So one plausibility for me was that they'd never met. But anyway, there's a young woman who is found dead at the same time or a little bit later than the terrible terrorist bombing. And okay, she's found in the river and she has burns. But it turns out, okay, surprise, she's not found connected to the bombing. It was like earlier.
She was found found like 10 minutes before the bombing happened.
Yeah, I think it was maybe a couple hours or something. But the point was that, okay, so somehow she's connected, and then talking about this science plus something higher or something more. Denzel Washington is introduced at the very beginning of the movie as somebody who's a loner. I mean, he's very successful. It's not clear what past life he's had, but he's not obviously with anybody. He's not married, doesn't have any kids. And he starts, this is Paula Patton, he starts looking at this woman. And now here's where there's these interesting layers of discomfort and also sympathy, right? The discomfort is that we are watching somebody in their house, right? Which at that time, that was sort of a fantastic technology. But of course now, I mean, there are, you could, with some of the infrared technology I've seen used, like military have, like you can see through a wall and at least see the heat signature of somebody outside the wall.
Right.
With satellites, you can see through somebody's window. So we're getting real close to a drone, hanging out outside your house and watching you, which happens to people all the time now. So the surveillance society that we are living in, where our phones listen to us, we don't know when we're being watched. Every detective show that I've ever watched in the last 10 years has a real problem. In fact, you almost wonder why they make detective series anymore, because there's a camera everywhere, right? We just went through this with the whatever happened to poor Mrs. Nancy Guthrie,
right?
Is that you saw like somebody coming to her house masked, ready for the cameras. And of course, everybody's got cameras, right? So there's cameras everywhere. In the detective series, I've noticed, I don't watch that many of them, but I've noticed a lot of them have a plot where the detectives sort of range around doing different things. And then like 3 minutes before the end, oh yeah, let's pull the security camera tapes across the street. Oh, there's the murderer right there, right?
Right.
But this wasn't quite there yet in 2006. So
we're still removed from the iPhone for what, 18 months almost? I mean, this film is one of the last like pre-iPhone films.
I think he's got a flip phone, right?
He does. He does have he has like a Nokia essentially. Like, yeah, he has. I don't even think. Yeah, it's either a flip phone or it's just one of those like hard body Nokias, the little like the Snickers bar phone.
Yeah, those things could survive an explosion. You could play Snake on them too.
Well, I mean, to be fair, right? His phone is going off at the end of the movie after he was in blast radius of a bomb. So he's dead, but his phone survived being underwater and blown up. So I think you're right.
Maybe Nokia would have prospered more if they could advertise that we survived time travel
and being blown up. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
His phone survived time travel even, huh?
So anyway, I do like that. I do like those layers. You can tell he and a number of the scientists are uncomfortable with this. Like, we are watching somebody's private life. She's taking a shower. She has a personal moment. But then you have this overriding issue of like, well, we're trying to catch somebody who just killed 500 plus people. So this goes to something we face in society all the time, is ends justifying means.
Right.
And they've got this new technology. Never has any new technology ever been developed that people stop themselves from using, with a few exceptions.
Right.
But Yeah, you can imagine.
It's the Ian Malcolm of it all, right? I mean, it's the we didn't ask if we never stopped ourselves and asked if we should. We just did, And I love the conceit in this movie with Adam Goldberg's character, where they're like, "Well, we were researching something else, and then we found out we could generate a wormhole," and it's like that. I love that conceit as well, because that is such a fun way of like, we were doing something else and this came about because of it, which also feels very real world, feels very real. Like, a lot of inventions that have come out of the world have been from military technology, or vice versa, was not a military technology and turned into military technology. Like, that is the thing. So it's interesting. I like that it's like a bunch of these like Cambridge students were, trying to figure out how to increase optic lens enhancement, and they ended up creating a wormhole. Like, okay, like, you know what? I could believe that. It's more believable than other wormholes we've seen recently that are just like, a wormhole happened. It's like, what, that's not, no. Like, if you're going to mention it, you got to explain it somehow, or give us some, if you're going to explain it a little bit, you have to explain it a little bit more than you think, but don't overdo it. This movie, I think, underdoes it at times. I think there's one or two moments where I'm like, we're verging on a little much here, but I think this movie does a good job at balancing that. Less explanation is more, but you have to give some to keep people engaged.
Yeah, it feels science adjacent. It doesn't feel science lunatic or crazy. I mean, there's enough science there to feel like it respects science. And what you just said is really important, because I'm at a university, and one of the arguments that scientists, STEM people, any social scientists, humanists make is that often, as you're saying, like, there's a long history of inventions that were not discovered linearly. Like, somebody was doing basic research. They were not trying to design a microwave oven. They were not trying to design something in particular, but they were trying to understand the fundamental workings of the universe, and boom, something practical came from it. So when science is funded, it's important that it's not always asked, okay, what's going to be the practical result?
Right.
So we don't know where we're going to get time travel from, which I don't believe is possible, but it is in this movie.
Well, you can travel to the past, but you can't you could travel to the future, but you can't travel to the past, is what it is. And I think that's the thing that I appreciate about this movie. And, it's funny to think about something else that utilizes time travel and almost tries to explain it in a similar way is Avengers Endgame tries to use this same theory of time travel. Like, we have the bending time back on itself, right? Which is the initial theory of how we're doing it. But then we also have the female character, Shanti, who's one of the other scientists who's kind of at odds with Adam Goldberg. She says, hey, there's also this other idea that there are all these concurrent timelines going at the same time. And so while, yes, you are traveling back on yourself, you could possibly change something, which means you have created another timeline concurrent to the other timeline that's still going. And what I like about this movie is it actually integrates the two things together. Endgame tries to, and I think fails because it over-explains. It's like, oh, it's like Back to the Future. There's none of that in this movie. They just say it, and they move on. We get Adam Goldberg folding the paper in on itself, but we don't get him pressing the pen through it, is my point. They stop short of Adam Goldberg sticking the pen through the piece of paper that's folded to signify we can punch a hole through space-time. Because I think they do that in at least Avengers Endgame, possibly Stranger Things, and at least in and Interstellar as well, I think, where it's like we fold it like this and punch through. It's like, okay, I'm glad they don't do it here. We get like the halfway of it. Like this movie is very restrained with what it's doing, and I think it pays off in a movie that doesn't treat its audience like we're mumbling idiots who aren't here for a sci-fi movie.
Yeah, it does what is achievable in a reasonably good science fiction movie, which is it states some things which may not be scientifically correct now. Who knows, right? And they may not be completely plausible, but like just enough of them that we can get the plot going and we don't have to stop every 5 minutes for a new scientific explanation. So it's got a level of competence that's warranted, right? Like, I mean, to me, the signature action scene in this movie, which probably I did. It's funny, I didn't remember it, but like, oh yeah, this was the most enjoyable. Yeah,
I didn't remember it either.
Yeah, like, I mean, okay, so there's a car chase, and the car chase is probably Hollywood's most repeated signature event, right? A car chase in a movie. And of course, over the years, they've tried every possible variation of the car chase. I remember there was one, was it a Roger Moore James Bond, where they've always had car chases in James Bond movies, the signature car chase and like a stunt.
Right.
And this one, they gave him like a little tiny Fiat, like a little tiny car, like not a $400,000 sports car. And because they were just trying to come up with some variation on a car chase. Well, this is quite a variation on a car chase because Denzel Washington is following somebody in the past. Like he's using a camera that can see in the past to follow somebody. And I think you have to watch the movie if you haven't to appreciate it. But it's like really well done. I mean, it's what Tony Scott does best, is a kinetic action sequence.
It is a technically impressive scene from, like you said, from a filmmaking standpoint, but from a conceptual standpoint, it's so interesting. We have, like you said, we have a character who knows where the bomber is going to be, and he follows his car, but he's following his car in the past, and he isn't orientated correctly initially, so he's on a bridge with the guy going the wrong direction, and he has to figure out a way to turn around, and he literally just ends up like causing like a 3 or 4 car pileup, which one of my favorite lines of the movie is just call the police to the Crescent City Bridge. Like, yeah, that's gonna help the guy whose car went flying through the air and did like a pirouette through the air that you hit. But it's such a novel idea because, like you said, the car chase is such a, I wouldn't say tired, but it is such a easy trope to go back to, especially in action movies, especially if you're looking to fill time easily. And like you said, this is such a novel way of doing it. It feels so unique and different. And I didn't remember it either. I am almost like kicking myself for not remembering it because I can't think of another car chase in a film that's like this at all. I mean, this is unique unto itself as a car chase in a film.
Yes. Now, there are some familiar elements. I remember when I was very young, I watched a film called Lethal Weapon. And this is so long ago. I mean, I'm laughing as I'm saying that, like, I watched a film called Lethal Weapon. Like, it's become an iconic film. But it was such a long time ago that the trope of the police officer who gets in a car chase and kills 50 people driving home from work. But the only thing he gets is that his boss says, "Hey, don't do that again, or else I'll
slap on the wrist."
I'll put you in the work unit, and you'll be filling out forms. Don't ever kill those 50 people again. But so that has been something that just, I mean, it's been lampooned in Fall Guy. I'm sorry, the Family Guy, and a lot of other shows. And this one, that it sort of bothered me even at the time. It's just like, really. But because he goes the wrong way, right? He's the one who's causing the accidents. The actual terrorist is obeying the rules of the road.
That's right.
Denzel Washington is causing all the mayhem there. But it is really done well, and it's a signature. It stands out. Like, and again, I as you've said, I don't think I've seen anything quite like it done, even with today's technology. And in fact, you've said this on your show before. We're lucky to have some of the stunts done in the past, where they had to use, for example, practical effects, and they don't have bad AI CGI, which I'm sure they would use nowadays. Where just when you were watching this, you were going like, wow, a lot of stunt people took a lot of risk to make this happen. Like, impressive. That's great.
I know. I like you said, like, I'm actually kind of disappointed in myself in a way for not remembering this movie, the chasing in this movie more fondly, because it's such a good chase scene, and it's such a well thought out chase scene. And again, it's one of those things where this movie, I don't know what you would consider this movie outside of it being a sci-fi movie. I don't think it's much of an action movie. It has a couple action set pieces, and this is a very good action set piece in an otherwise, I would say, non-action kind of, like, I wouldn't say specific, but the point of this movie is to not beat you over the head with the action, is my point. But it is a very good chase scene in a movie that is not necessarily concerning itself with action scene, which is interesting given the Tony Todd of it, or the Tony Scott of it all, because Tony Scott kind of known for shooting, and you brought it up, so let's talk about it a little bit. known for shooting action scenes that maybe I don't necessarily resonate with because they're not shot particularly well, because the way that he chose to shoot things is just not something I personally resonate with as a film watcher. And it would seem to me you maybe have a similar concern.
Well, I think that I have evolved over my lifetime. When I was younger, I was able to put up with an inordinate amount of cuts and swinging, wildly gesticulating cameras.
Lens flare.
Yeah. I think maybe my brain in its decay years, I just find it headache inducing. And I
am 36. I am 36, and it was still frustrating to me. Okay, it is not just you. I mean, I look at a film like a Paul Greengrass film, and I think the same thing. Like some of those later Born Identity movies, it's like, just cool it with the cuts. Cool it. We don't need 50 cuts in one scene.
Yeah, and that's why, if you're a Hollywood filmmaker or you're an aspiring filmmaker, I think whenever you ever have a chase scene or an action scene, it's, to me, more expensive, but it's also easier to do the 500 cuts, right? I mean, we've had some examples. To me, the most famous one, I guess, when I was growing up as an example of like an action scene that was all one take, was Orson Welles at his movie Touch of Evil. Right. The very first long, no cuts there. And that's interesting. I mean, you can't do it very often, but I mean, the point is that not every action scene has to be shot so frantically and kinetically. Sometimes the action itself is enough to get our attention. The other part about this, which I'd like to get your opinion as our representative of youth on this panel here, Chris, is that I actually like the love story here.
I agree.
I think it has a lot of problems in the sense that, like, he was introduced to her by basically spying on her. But I think he registers the amount of discomfort that he should. It is told to us, shown to us, that she has died horribly. So, like, the propellant of, like, solving her murder, along with the murders of these other people that she's linked to, seems like it's reason enough to violate her privacy, especially as the movie goes on and they start dropping hints and finally a confirmation that he might actually be able to save her.
So interestingly enough, I think that, and you asked me as the youth representative of the group today, what do I think of the romantic relationship between our lead, who effectively meets the other romantic lead on an autopsy table 10 minutes into the film. Because that's the first scene that they share together. She's already dead and he is, examining her, or he's part of, in the room during her autopsy. So it's strange. It's very different in terms of the way it's even framed to open it. And like you said, there is kind of this, I wouldn't say icky level, but could we call it a moral gray area? Because like you've alluded to, the loss of one's privacy should come at the trade-off of higher security. At least that's what we've been sold in this country. That's why when we go through TSA, we essentially give up our rights through going through the TSA. Penn Jillette always talks about having a little Bill of Rights printed on a piece of metal in his pocket so that when they go through the TSA, they can literally take his rights away as opposed to just figuratively doing it. They sell those at his show in Vegas. I know because I own one and I keep it on me from time to time. So it's interesting in a post 9/11 society that this is one of the few movies I can think of that exists as I am meeting her because we have been spying on her, but we are spying on her under the auspices of preventing her death from happening, which is not it could happen. It is it has happened, and we are trying to prevent a thing that is a given from happening.
Right. Her rights are being diminished, but
her rights are already diminished effectively. Is kind of the argument I would make is it's less icky than it seems only because she's already dead. But I think that plot contrivance works in the film's favor, because otherwise this movie would not be not that it's a meet cute, but it's somewhat of a meet cute in the way that they want to play it off. Like, oh, they met through this insane murder terrorism investigation, and that bonded them forever. I mean, at one point he kisses her when he runs off, and I'm like, why are you kissing her? Like, why are you kissing her? But it totally works because you have to sell that by the end of the movie she will be willing to talk to him, to tell him what he told her, to get him up to speed with what happened. Because, like she says, what if you had to tell the most important person in the world the hardest thing you've ever had to tell him? And it's, I'd try. Like, I love that there is that at the center of this movie, because it like you said, like, ultimately the film is about what do you do in moments of grief and loss, but also what do you do in moments where you have to find immense amounts of strength within yourself to do something that seems impossible. Because again, we get the sense that what Denzel Washington does in this movie is impossible, and it is through only some kind of divine intervention that he is able to stop Jim Caviezel from blowing up this ferry. There is some divine intervention in this movie, is there not?
Yes. Let me just talk about that, a fan theory that I have, which I'm not sure I've seen anywhere else. So this is my own completely lunatic fan theory that I can register or trademark right now, is that this, like a lot of Denzel Washington movies, I've seen some interviews with him. He is a deeply spiritual person. He does believe in hereafter and God and so on. And I think that enters some of his characters in movies. I got a feeling that something that was implied but not stated, which is pretty unusual for a Tony Scott film, was that maybe somehow the essence of time travel or the system of time travel, that they have met before, in the sense that, like, maybe that the plot of the film, it isn't that they're in a time loop, but some of the energy, and I know I'm sounding like I'm spouting pseudoscience, but I think it's part of, like, the theory of how time travel works, is that he didn't do this already and they're just going in a loop. It's just that when he's looking at her, there is this moment of, like, wait a minute, do I know her? Is there some recognition? And then the same thing. And I think these are two excellent actors. She's a very good actress.
Oh, Paula Patton is fantastic. They have great chemistry together. That's what works. That's why it works, is because they share all of, like, 3 or 4 scenes together when they're alive, and it works like gangbusters. The two of them, like, really works. And that's the only way this movie works, is because they actually have chemistry when they're on screen together.
Yes. And so they're able to accomplish something of subtlety here, which I think if it had been stated, like if the script had, Denzel Washington said, in a way we have met before, and I think there's a magical resonance in time travel that comes from a higher power. Those things are better left unstated.
Right.
It should be, good actors can just give you a feeling of something that you take away walking out of the movie. And I think that was something that was going on there, that there was something beyond just the events there. And something else you said, and I'm going to go on a little tangent. I apologize. This is my lecture hour for the next 2 minutes. One of the challenges whenever you watch any kind of genre movie, or especially a subgenre, a time travel movie, a zombie movie, a spy movie, is you go sort of ask yourself, haven't these people ever watched a movie before? In the TV series Pluribus, the main character, who is caught in a sort of hive mind world where almost everybody in the world is thinking differently, she says, we've all watched this movie before. And the fact is, like, nobody on planet Earth should be shocked at a time travel plot. They just might be shocked it's happening to them.
Right.
So there's a fun little movie, which I don't know whether it's worth, like, devoting an episode, but I really loved it. It's called Round and Round, and it's a Hallmark movie. And yeah, it's a Hallmark movie, but it's a really good Hallmark movie. It's one of their few Hanukkah movies. And in the movie, the main character is a young woman, and she gets caught in a Groundhog Day time loop. But they do 2 things which are very clever, which, like, lift it, besides it being funny and interesting, lift it above not only the typical Hallmark movie, but like the typical time loop movie, is they recognize that these people exist in our universe. So like the first thing she thinks of is, oh my gosh, I'm in a Groundhog Day situation. But then they go further in cleverness and okay, suppose you actually found yourself in something that's familiar from the movie world, right? Like you found my gosh, I am actually reliving the same day over and over again.
Right.
Well, where would you go where you could find people who would believe you and might have clever ideas on what to do? A comic book store. And that's what happens in the movie is her love interest happens to know these guys at a comic book store who they're geeky guys who know all popular culture from all time and have discussed every situation. Like they've had 300 conversations like, yeah, what if we were in a time loop? What would we do? And these guys come up with some ideas of what to do to get out of the time loop. Okay, so that's a completely different movie than the one we're talking about. But I do like that in this movie, while nobody says, hey, I saw 5 time travel movies before and they did this, there is a sort of understanding of like, what are the possibilities, right? When he's asking
more
questions.
than we understand here. Your science does not define and explain everything. And I like that there's that it's a crack is left open. But the movie at the end, it goes right to that crack and peers through it and says, yeah, we know if you're looking through it with us, we see you. Because that moment at the end of the film where Denzel looks at her and goes, no. And then they drive off. It's like, he doesn't need to do anything else. That one line and that look at her is all you need to know that he understands in that moment the entire plot of the movie that has come before. And he's just fucking way. Like, no way. And it's like, yeah, you're right. No way. Like, I don't know how he would believe it other than giving himself over in that moment to some other divine being. Because there is no explanation that the movie is going to give otherwise. And so my assumption is the explanation that Denzel gives is the explanation the movie wants us to have. And I'm curious if that was in the film to begin with, if that wasn't something that Denzel brought to the table. Because like you said, I have also seen interviews with him, and he seems to be a deeply spiritual person and he also seems like he's the kind of guy who knows what he likes and what he does when he works with people. So I wouldn't be surprised if he was like, put this in there, or let's include this, or let's have this, let's lean into this a little bit more. Because it's weird. Science and faith tend to not intersect one another. They tend to be separate lanes. And when they do intersect, they're not intersecting in a complementary commingling way like they are here. This movie is essentially saying time travel exists, but also God exists and has some capacity to be in control of time travel.
God is there somewhere in this movie. There's no question. We get a sense of it. There was years ago, Carl Sagan is probably the most famous science popularizer, but there was another gentleman, a biologist, a very accomplished biologist named Stephen Jay Gould. He wrote a lot of popular science books. And he had this one sentence. It was in an essay about science and religion. And I always remember this sentence because, gosh, it's so well written. He said, science and religion should be non-overlapping magisteria. What he meant was scientists really shouldn't give advice about religion, and people who are religious shouldn't give advice about science. And we'll just agree that these worlds are not antithetical to each other, but just like we can respect both worlds, right?
Right.
And I think this is a movie. It's not often that we describe a Tony Scott film as restrained.
No. That's the last thing I would describe a Tony Scott film in a lot of ways.
Yeah, but I feel like this is among his best movies because it chooses to leave, as you say, certain things unexplained, certain things implied, certain things just as a feeling that honestly would sound stupid or silly or just feel wrong if they were just straight out some character yapped away at them. And that ending where we fill in that they're going to, by the end of the conversation, they're both going to be convinced that something happened. And, I hope they get married and live happily ever after. That's great.
What I love about the movie is that by the end of it, you foresee what you just said being a reasonable possibility because of the chemistry, because of the restraint, because the movie doesn't club you over the head with what it's getting at either. I love that, like you said, we don't have an over explanation of the time travel where the movie at the end feels like it can't just let time change. It can't, like, normally when you put yourself into a box, sometimes you put a lid on that box even. And in putting a lid on that box, you have no way out of said box. In putting a little faith or the mystery of the divine into this, you kind of give yourself a little bit of a parachute out of here where you're like, well, you know, there is the faith. There is the divine interference. It could have been that. And they don't need to belabor that point. They just go, okay, all right. Like, I don't need a movie sometimes to do any more than that because I can make my own conclusion. I can get to the point the movie wants to get to. The movie doesn't have to drag me. I am coming along willingly.
And we've talked a lot about Denzel Washington and Paula Patton's character, but let's give recognition to Adam Goldberg because he actually embodies a lot of what you're saying. Like at the beginning, he comes off like, okay, this is going to be the smug, know-it-all, jerk scientist character that we're all pretty familiar with as like he knows everything and he's cynical and doesn't have any real feelings or emotions, but
I don't have any time to explain this to you. Is essentially the way his character comes off.
And so obsessed with the science that he's not thinking about the human ramifications of the science, right? That group of scientists, they have one who tends to be more caring and the one who's always making some cynical, smug remarks, you know, and Adam Goldberg is sort of in the middle. And by the end, talk about it. There's a wonderful moment and a sort of, I find a slightly silly moment. But yeah, Adam Goldberg says, well, you know, I think you can time travel. And so Denzel Washington gets into the machine and sort of squeezes in there. And Adam Goldberg is a good enough actor that he is resonating like, okay, you've taught me something. You know, the science is what I was obsessed about because of course we want our scientists obsessed with science. You produce better science when you're obsessed with something, right?
Right.
But you can see that he feels like he's taken something about, we haven't mentioned the word love, but like not beyond spirituality and God and something beyond the physical realm. There's love here, right? About the love between these two main characters. And Adam Goldberg sort of registers, I get there's something more important than the science here. Love.
Right.
I thought that was a great performance.
Which no, to your point, I think is very interesting because again, the movie goes places I wouldn't have expected it to go because it feels like it's being written by two screenwriters who I think have a better sense of what makes this an interesting story is taking it to an interesting spot and actually leaving it there and not just taking us to that interesting spot and then just kind of looking at it like and then running away and not giving us time. Like I think this movie is really invested in doing something different and forcing the audience to kind of sit with it and to look at the two screenwriters. Bill Marsili has not done a whole lot, but Terry Rossio has done a lot of things, both television and movie. And, you know, doing the research, the two of them were friends who worked on Rossio had an idea for a one-page script where a cop is looking back a week to investigate his girlfriend's murder. And, you know, that is where the notion of the idea came from. And then it kind of blossomed from there. And that idea, you can see that base idea here at the center of this script, but it's so much more built out than that. You have we haven't even talked about Val Kilmer yet, who's an interesting kind of, he's almost more hands-off than I would have wanted him to be as a character and as an actor, because I love Val Kilmer so much, and obviously he's no longer with us. So any role that we get to see of him now is, you know, cherish it because we're not getting any more. He's not in it enough. But the person that I want to talk about that I found very interesting is Jim Caviezel, of all people, playing what I would put, he's doing his best Timothy McVeigh impersonation, is what I perceive it as. Like, it's very Timothy McVeigh, Terry Nichols, Ruby Ridge, like one of those people that now seem to be running around with more prevalence than they were in 2006, which is very interesting to me because that in and of itself feels kind of prescient with the rise of kind of a certain kind of feeling and sentiment that his character embodies that was around for a long time. And you see that here too, because we get a whole scene of him back and forth with Denzel kind of outing himself as to what his, you know, modus operandi or his motivating force is for why he blows a ferry of military members and their family.
Yeah, I want to go back to Val Kilmer for a moment. Yeah, he's in a forgettable role. I mean, anybody could have been FBI agent Jones. I forgot how to spell it.
Paul Pizzuara, which, by the way, they gave him the most difficult name to pronounce on top of everything else.
If I rewritten the screenplay, I would have not done the Marvel thing. A lot of the people that are like Claire Kuchever, Paul Pizarro,
right?
Never do the alliteration to Clark Kent or whatever. But anyway, he has just a moment. Really, he's not a major role. I think honestly, his role and the Bruce Greenwood role could just been compacted into one person.
Agreed. 100%.
Yeah. But it shows something else Tony Scott had as a filmmaker, which was that almost all the time, it's hard to think of any of his films where anyone was a bad actor or completely miscast. Usually he found really good people in roles. Now, sometimes those roles were pretty stereotypical or what you'd expect, but he had a crew, Val Kilmer being one of them, that just, they were always good in what they did, right? And this film was there. So I guess for me, this movie is not in like the greatest movies ever made, but it is a movie that checks a lot of boxes for success. I always like to tell my students, one way to look at a movie is, was it successful in what it set out to do? Because if something is setting out to be a light, frothy comedy and something else is supposed to be a dark, disturbed, journey into the abyss of the human mind, you can't really compare them and say one's better than the other. It's just, did they succeed in what they were attempting? And so I felt like this is an action thriller, a love story, a little bit of spiritual philosophy, meditation, a time travel movie, and it does all of those things pretty well.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, for me, I think it probably, in terms of it being an action movie, I think it doesn't do much in terms of the kind of one set piece we get with the car chase through time, I would say, or reverse car chase, or however you would want to interpret it. I don't think that the film really does a lot else, and it doesn't really bother itself with being an action movie per se, which I feel like is a tad of a missed opportunity. But at the same time, I like we've clearly already talked about, like, the movie's not necessarily concerning itself with being an action movie per se. I mean, I think the problem I maybe have with the movie is it feels like there is actually something more interesting to be said here, and the movie actually is not getting to it. And I think that there is an interesting story that could be told about the intersection between time travel and faith, and the idea of what does that mean, and how does one put one's faith in technology to go back and do something like this with the belief and faith that the change that you're making is the right one or a positive one. And that's the other thing that the movie never gets to. We go with the character that Denzel Washington is playing, that what he is doing will cause a positive change in the world, saving her life. But that is a question that he never asks himself about the other 543 people on that boat that he saves, and what their possible moral compass is and what direction they may be pointing. And that's an interesting conversation that the movie doesn't have, but it starts verging on having a intellectual conversation about time travel that most movies that use time travel don't have any interest in getting involved.
Well, it's interesting because most time travel TV shows and movies have as a sort of overriding driving principle that's stated out loud is we can't change the past. Whatever we do, we can't change the past, right?
Over and over.
And sometimes we'll be told, like, oh gosh, if you change the past, there'll be terrible consequences. And there have been some very famous science fiction stories that I'm thinking of. One, won't go too far in there, but like people go back in time to the era of the dinosaurs, and a guy steps on a butterfly.
Yeah.
And the ripples through time. The world has changed completely.
The movie is terrible, by the way.
Yeah, I won't even mention it. Sound of Thunder is the story. It should never.
It has Ben Kingsley in it too, by the way, which is just oy. I was gonna say that the butterfly effect, while the Sound of Thunder is terrible, the movie The Butterfly Effect does that same thing. I think poorly, but it gets to the same idea of, small changes in the past occurring, changing things broadly or bigger in the future. I like that this movie goes, you know what? We're just ignoring that kind of and hanging a lantern on it in the corner. And the point is to change it. Like, we don't care what happens if we change it. We're trying to change it.
Screw the time travel, the continuum there.
Isn't that kind of this movie in a way? Like, we're trying to change it. Like, don't change. You can't change the past. That's what we're trying to do. So we're going to do anything within our power to do that. Like,
I think there's an argument about whether you can change the past. And this goes to this idea. Of course, a lot of time loop movies, when you go back in time, it turns out to be part of time that you went back in time. So there's nothing changed because it's already figured into the universe. And then I'm also thinking, of course, of the incredible time travel episode. There's several one in the original Star Trek, but they go back in time to the 1920s and they meet Edith. I think I even remember her name, Edith Keeler. I think
so. Yeah.
And they meet a young woman who, in that timeline, is going to start a peace movement and prevent America from entering World War II and allow the Nazis to win the Second World War. And so I think 11-year-old me thought this was some of the deepest science fiction philosophy ever. It really is a beautiful story.
It is.
Absolutely beautiful story. And they realize, Spock especially, realizes that, she has to die. There's no way to avoid letting, they had done something to change the past, and they have to unchange it. So this movie blithely ignores that Star Trek episode and a lot of other parts. But it's okay.
Terminator as well. I mean, Terminator's the other big one, right? Like, Arnold has to die at the end of Terminator 2 to close the loop so that the robots don't take over. That's not what happened. They couldn't help themselves, and that's not our fault. But if Terminator 2 had ended the way it was supposed to, Arnold dies. There's no chips left. That's it. Bob's your uncle. They've prevented the robot uprising. I mean, again, like we are literally living with time travel for the most part, not changing things. In Avengers Endgame, they have to take the jewels back at the end of the movie so that nothing happens untoward in the timeline, and then they just didn't care anyway. I like that this movie just says, screw your rules. We're going to do this anyways. And it works in a way. It works in a way that if you don't constrain yourself so much, you can get away with from time to time because everybody else is constraining themselves so much. If you bring up other time travel movies when you're talking about time travel, you are doing too much to try to explain.
Yes. As I said, it worked in this Round and Round because I felt that they had to bring up Groundhog Day. Like, it just was not credible that any human on the planet had not thought a little bit about.
Right, I agree.
The Groundhog Day, but then they run with it, and it's a fun, frothy, light comedy that has some interesting philosophical things. But what I'd like to end on is something that you have mentioned, and we've talked a little bit about, and I felt was part of the beauty of The Arrival with Amy Adams.
Yeah.
Which is based on a Ted Chiang famous short story about the idea of continuity, of something that happens in the future has also already happened.
Right.
And I do feel that this is a movie that doesn't state it as explicitly as Arrival, where like the terrible thing that happens in the future and the terrible thing that happened in the past are equally already occurring.
Right.
And influences somebody. And philosophically, you just have to accept that. But I think it is implied here. And I think it lends a somewhat depth to this movie that you wouldn't get from either the average time travel movie or the average, would-be action thriller.
I also think for me, the other thing that's fun, because I went and did some, digging online, because again, this is a movie that feels like you just said, it ties everything up, and it cares about making sure that everything is given a time and place and an explanation. The overwhelming fan theory with this film is we're actually not seeing the first time that this has happened, but we're actually seeing the second time that this has happened, because how else would we have his dead body at the beginning of the movie sitting on the pier? And what happened in the first round is he did not prevent the bomb successfully from going off, and his body was somewhere on the boat at the beginning of the movie, or he was on the boat somewhere at the beginning of the movie, and we never saw it, or something happened that caused him to be on the boat at the beginning of the movie. That's why his cell phone is on someone's dead body, his own dead body at the beginning of the movie, which would be a crazy level of continuity to cop to, because that would mean a whole nother movie happened before the movie we even saw.
Yeah, I said that my theory was that they could be in some sort of loop, but that it happened once before. I mean, I think some of these people who've gone deep, I mean, it's amazing how Groundhog Day, which I do think is a truly amazing film, has produced so much scholarship, like books of philosophy, right? And of course, I think people have talked about the fact that Bill Murray probably went through at least hundreds, if not thousands of days.
Yeah, to become an expert at any one of those things takes hundreds of thousands of hours, which is hundreds, if not thousands of days.
But in order for him to remember the skill sets that he had, there had to have been some physical continuity. I mean, like the cells in his brain stayed the same cells, right? So in order for him to learn the piano, he couldn't just repeat 1,000 days and reset. So in this movie, it is saying that there is a 99.9% reset, but there's something else. And I just think it works really well.
Is that the faith of the movie? Do you think that 1% is what the movie is giving the space for the faith of the movie? Because that's what it feels like to me. That's the little bit of faith that the movie gives, the intangible, unexplainable, is the movie giving that little bit of space to, I mean, why did the Beach Boys come on at the end of the movie again? You know what I mean? It's that little moment of like, the divine intervention is the Beach Boys comes on again at the end of the movie, right? A song that just played not 5-10 minutes before is playing again on the radio. And it's that same song, and he hears it, and he heard it before, not 10 minutes. Like, that feels like the small amount of divine intervention. That, like you said, the 1%. And time travel movies don't concern themselves with this kind of stuff at all. And it's weird that this one does, because it feels, I remember enjoying this movie when I saw it, but I don't remember thinking that this is one of the most interesting time travel movies I've ever seen. This is one of the most interesting time travel movies I think that has ever been made, because it actually makes time travel seem not plausible, but it doesn't make it feel like by the end of it, I couldn't follow along with what it was getting at. And that's a rarity for time travel.
Yeah, one thing I forgot to add, which I really liked, was that time travel was incredibly, inordinately expensive.
Right, it blacks out the entire East Coast.
I don't like time travel movies where the time travel is accomplished with 2 AA batteries. And I realized, like, hey, shout out to Back to the Future, that like they had a little mini nuclear reactor and something like that. Even then they realized you're going to have to spend some energy if you're going to time travel. But this one, there's a very cute scene where they talk about some blackout, I think that occurred in Boston, and one of the scientists said, yeah, that was me, my bad. And so that's a moment of humor that sort of lends a little bit of scientific credibility. Like, yeah, we can look back in the future, but we're going to, and talk about prescient. The moment when I was watching this film again, like 3 weeks ago, preparing for today, the moment when I saw that, I thought, oh, AI and data centers.
Right.
Like, we have this new technology, which, I mean, people are using it for very advanced things, and people are also using it just to like make pictures of kittens, but it's costing us a massive amount of energy and water. The price of the new technology is extremely high, and this movie sort of gave a little bit of hint of that for what was to come.
I will also mention the other thing about time travel that I appreciate is we never get a sense of what they could do with the time travel otherwise, because it feels so, I wouldn't say it feels so useless, but it does kind of feel useless, right? Like, the time travel seems so specifically useful, it almost feels broadly useless. Like, what are you going to do 4 days in the past in most capacities if you can't go back in time and you can't affect it? Like, it will be only kind of specifically useful in a specifically useful way. It's like having a really high-powered telescope, which is why it's so interesting that they allude to initially that it's like, well, it's just a high-powered imaging catalog that's essentially creating it's essentially what they pitch it as is it's creating a 3D space that you're watching things occur inside. And what it actually is you're seeing back in time. Either way, that technology is effectively useless broadly. It's niche useful, but I love is that we don't get the typical, well, the military tried to use this for its own functionality. Like, there's no usefulness the military would ever get out of this, like, at all. And you get the sense that this technology is almost more trouble than it's worth in a lot of ways. Like, they're moving this giant thing around. It's blacking out the eastern seaboard. For what? Like, for what are we getting out of it? Like, very little seeming.
Yeah, I mean, everybody who owns a telescope is able to view back in time, right? Because if you have an especially powerful telescope up in orbit, you're looking back billions of years. So you are seeing a star dying billions of years ago because, of course, the light took 5 billion years to reach us or something like that. So the idea of looking back in time is actually very familiar. But the interactivity combined with our surveillance world, where everything is being recorded, is something that was pretty innovative for 2006. I mean, I'm a science fiction buff, so I can name some stories that I grew up reading where they had time viewers. And I remember there's one story, I actually completely forgotten who wrote it. I think it was not some famous author, but like somebody invents a time viewer and they can see Alexander the Great, right? Live.
Right.
Same way here. So that wasn't like a lot of popular Hollywood movies are reprising very familiar plots from old science fiction of the 40s and 50s. It's the first time we're seeing it on the screen.
Right.
But again, this movie did not win the Academy Award, did not deserve the Academy Award, but it's worth viewing as what it is. And probably even a little bit more than what it was, like a little bit higher level than the average either action thriller or time travel movie.
Well, and given that, like we've already alluded to, and I've mentioned several times now, the Avengers Endgame of it all, making time travel that much more ubiquitous, that much more mainstream, making time travel a component of the biggest film ever to be released, and effectively doing time travel in the same way that this movie is, both having a folding time back in on itself and multiple timelines going at the same time. Like, Avengers Endgame tried to do this same thing. Like, this movie on 1/1000th of the budget did a better job in one scene with Adam Goldberg and Val Kilmer explaining time travel than Mark Ruffalo and Tilda Swinton could have in Avengers Endgame. And it just goes to show that the creative level that some writers operate at in Hollywood is just at a different level. And the expectation of certain writers for their audiences is different, because I feel like the reason this film resonates with me and you so much is because it doesn't treat us as the audience like idiots. Like, we've never seen a time travel movie before. Like, we don't know where this is already going, but it does some interesting things to keep us as the audience engaged. It keeps us kind of guessing. It keeps us on our toes. It seems like one thing, it becomes another thing, and ultimately it's another thing. Those three twists in tandem all kind of work. It's a movie that just, I think, like you said, is it the best movie I've ever seen? No. But it's definitely up there for one of the best time travel movies I've ever seen. Like, of a certain ilk, it's definitely the best. Is it Time Crimes? No. Is it, some of those other, I'm trying to remember the other one, where it's the two guys in the business office going into the box over and over again. I don't know.
Looper.
Looper.
No,
not Looper.
No, I know what you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
Zero budget movie that has just become famous
because of the way it utilizes time
yeah.
travel. This reminds me.
Looper was another one where it was pretty well done. I mean, I think you've covered it.
But I've never covered it, but it's again, it gets mentioned in that same conversation. But I don't think you need a massive budget to do time travel interesting. I don't think you need a massive budget to tell a time travel story, as long as you sort out how it's going to work and make it make sense within reason in the construct of the box you've constructed for yourself. And I think this movie does just that. I think this movie is entertaining. It's compelling, and it uses time travel in a way that, other movies I think wish they could, really. So I'm glad we got to talk about this movie. Like I said, I'm glad I got to watch it. Tony Scott's not someone I necessarily go out of my way to watch all the time. I think the last Tony Scott movie I watched was True Romance, which is one of the few Tarantino movies that I can stomach, and it's probably because he didn't direct it. So I'm glad I got to watch this. I've already mentioned it to a couple people, like, you should rewatch this movie. It's definitely worth checking out. So hopefully I'll get a couple more people reprising or taking a reprisal of this film. But thank you so much for reintroducing me to this movie. It was a pleasure. This is a good one.
Thank you. A memorable film that people should think about.
I agree. So, as always, you can follow me on Twitter at, maybe don't follow me on Twitter. Never mind, don't do. Just like, rate, and review the show on iTunes and Spotify, which is more than likely where you're getting it. If it's not on Spotify, get it on iTunes. If you're not getting it on iTunes, get it on Spotify. Do me a favor, like the show, leave a review. If you want to help us out financially, head on over to patreon.com/culturecast, where you can kick a couple dollars our way to join the community and get access to Rankin' on Bond, where we talk about James Bond once a month. If you're interested, Dr. Perlmutter mentioned James Bond. We talk about him a lot, like every single one of his movies. So go on over and do that. Join us there, where we talk with Richard Haddam and Mike White about James Bond, and come back for the next episode of the Kulturecast.